What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for checking in. In this video, we're going to talk about SPY, which is the S&P 500 ETF, and we're also going to cover some other notable names on the market, such as QQQ, Tesla, Apple, AMD, and NVDA. Let's go ahead and get started by first talking about SPY, and we're going to do so on the daily candles, where we can clearly see that SPY just made a new high for 2023 as of today, and it is continuing its uptrend for the 7th consecutive week. Now, this week will be a major test for the market as the Fed is expected to hold another FOMC meeting. The meeting started today and will conclude tomorrow, and tomorrow they will be deciding their interest rate decision. The market is not expecting the Federal Reserve to raise or lower interest rates, but they are hoping that the Federal Reserve will give us some kind of insight to how they're feeling about interest rates going into 2024. Inflation data has been coming down, and it has come down from 3.2% to 3.1% in November, closer to the Federal Reserve's 2% interest rate. And so as long as inflation is moving in that right direction, then the Federal Reserve is likely to hold rates steady and is likely to give us some kind of track plan for them to begin lowering interest rates back to more reasonable levels because they're no longer fighting off that strong inflation. So with that being said, let's jump into our charts and let's talk about what could happen after tomorrow's FOMC meeting and their interest rate decision. First things first, let's talk about SPY. We can clearly see that SPY is strongly bullish right now. We are at a point in which buyers are jumping into the market and greed is going extremely high. And so therefore, we can expect the markets to continue pushing higher. Here are some levels to focus on for SPY. First, before we jump into those levels, let's talk about it on the weekly chart where we can see that SPY broke above a very significant resistance over the last week, which is the resistance at 460. If you caught our last video, you know that 460 was a big focus for us because as long as we were below this level, we could have easily turned back down and sold off. However, now that we are above this level, we are clearly making higher highs and are trying to move towards that all-time high. We also have the 10 and 20-day moving averages here crossing up, which is another strong signal. Now, moving away from the weekly charts and zooming into the daily charts, if you are not the type of person to use price points as resistance and support points, then you need to focus on the moving averages. For the daily chart, you can see that SPY has been holding that 10-day moving average, which is this blue line, throughout this entire rally. So as long as it is holding that level, then it is strongly bullish. It can afford to come down to the 20-day moving average and retest that level and still stay strongly bullish. Every single day at the end of every day, you should be asking yourself, where did the daily candle close in relation to these two moving averages? Anything above the 10 and 20 is going to be strongly bullish. Anything below those levels can begin selling off because then they will act as a resistance point rather than what they're doing right now, acting as a support. And this goes for all the stocks that we're about to talk about today. Now, zooming into SPY on the hourly time frame, you can see that today was a little bit vertical, a little too vertical going into an FOMC meeting. So we may see a sharp drawdown before we continue pushing higher. But nonetheless, we are still strongly bullish on SPY. And our strongest support level here is going to be right around 459.40. And that stems from this breakout right here. We do not want to see the market move back below this breakout. So you can see that this was a resistance. We broke above it. And so buyers do not want to see us move back below that level because then they will begin taking profits and maybe lose a little bit of confidence. So as long as we're above that 459.40 mark, we are still strongly bullish. Our next resistance and focus is going to be right around 465. And above that, it's right around 468.85, which would be our next target. Now, to the downside, even if we broke below 459.40, we are still bullish. Buyers do not want to see us move back into this consolidation range. You can see that SPY consolidated here between the 20th until to about the 11th or the 12th. So that's about a 20-day consolidation period before it was able to push higher. And so buyers don't want us to move back below into this support or consolidation range. If we do move back to that range, then we have another support at 455.20, and below that, the critical support is between 451.90 and 447.70. If we move back to below this point, then we can potentially take a short or a put position down to this price target. The next stock on our watch list is going to be QQQ, which, like SPY, has moved to another new 2023 high and is inching closer towards its all-time highs. Here are some shorter term levels to focus on for QQQ. We first have a support at 394.40. That support stems from this breakout point here. You can see that QQQ got rejected here on November 29th, and so buyers were looking for a breakout above that level. Once they got that breakout today, you can see on this candle they came and retested that support before pushing higher. So now we can conclude that if QQQ stays above 394.40, it is going to push towards our 402 to 404 price targets. Now, if it breaks below 394.40, it is still bullish. However, it won't have as much confidence going into the rest of the week, and we may not see it move back up for another few weeks. Now, 394.40 and below is still bullish. However, if it breaks below 382.66, that's when things can get pretty ugly pretty quickly. This is a pretty aggressive downside support. We don't expect it to see it this week, but anything can happen on interest rate decision days. If it does break below 382.66, then we have another downside support right around 375. The next stock on our watch list has been one of the quieter stocks, ironically, because Tesla is typically one of the big movers, but we can clearly see that for the last 20 days, Tesla has not made any moves higher or lower. It has just been moving sideways, and if you are an options trader, it has been purely draining premium day over day. Here are some levels to focus on for Tesla. If you are buying calls or puts on the stock, make sure you're giving yourself plenty of time. We're talking into January and February of next year, just so you have plenty of time for it to consolidate and finally make a move. We are leaning bullish on Tesla with a breakout above 252.75. Our first price target is right around 257, and our second is right around 268. To the downside, if Tesla breaks below 226.30, then we are short or will play puts on the stock down towards the 211 to 212 price target. The next stock on our watch list is going to be Apple. If you are looking at Apple's daily, you can see that the stock, like SPY, is starting to move closer towards its 2023 highs, and we are expecting it to move towards or above 200 as long as it holds that 10 and 20-day moving averages. Here are some levels to focus on for Apple. If you are bullish on the stock, you need a breakout above 196.15 for a move towards 198 to 199. And we will be updating the rest of the price targets in our coming video, so make sure you're checking back in. To the downside, Apple has a support right around 191.40. If it breaks below that point, then a lot of profit taking may happen, because then it will move back into this consolidation range. You can see that it's spent weeks consolidating here, and so buyers do not want to see it move back into that level because it may be difficult to get it back up. To the downside, Apple has a support right around 187.50. If it breaks below that support, then things can get pretty ugly pretty quickly, and it can begin to fill this gap towards 185. The next stock on our watch list is going to be AMD, which made an absolutely phenomenal move today. We actually traded AMD, and you can see that the stock has actually moved towards our price target, towards our second price target that we have had on it since September 14th. We entered the stock right around 108, and the stock hit 140 today, and we are still holding shares. So for AMD, if you are looking at the stock, obviously on the daily chart, the stock is strongly bullish, and this is something that I urge you today to do day over day. On the very short term, the stock may seem overbought, but if you zoom out on the weekly chart and on the daily chart, you can see that these stocks are just beginning to break out of a very long-standing consolidation period. So don't be fooled by short-term pullbacks. Most of these stocks are now very bullish and are looking to move much higher going into 2024. Here are some levels to focus on for AMD in the very short term. First of all, we have a resistance at 141.30. If it breaks above that point, it will continue its rally towards 152 to 153. To the downside, AMD has a support at 131.90, but the critical support here is going to be 126.70. If AMD breaks below that point, then you can see that there's not much support below that point. You can see that this move was nearly vertical, and AMD is likely to sell off towards 116 to 118. Again, these are aggressive price targets. Make sure you're checking back in so we can update you on these levels. Last but not least, NVIDIA. Let's talk about it first of all on the weekly, where we can see that NVIDIA has retested its 10 and 20-day moving averages on the weekly chart twice, and so far it has bounced off of them very strongly, and it is inching closer and closer to moving back towards all-time highs. You can see that it's building this baseline support, and it is looking like it is making higher highs and trying to move its way higher. Here are some shorter-term levels to focus on for NVIDIA. First thing we want to address is the fact that its current range is very wide. And so if you are trading options, short-term options are not going to work very well unless you're day trading them. You want to take multi-month contracts on NVIDIA because it may take some time before it finally breaks out and continues its move towards all-time highs. Right now, NVIDIA's resistance is going to be 487.70, and above that it's 495. If it breaks above 495, we expect it to retest that 509.17 level, which is its all-time highs. To the downside, NVIDIA has a strong support at 449. A break below that level can move it towards a price target of around 437. And below 437, it can actually begin filling this gap down towards that 424 level. And we will be updating these targets again. Make sure you're checking back in next Sunday when we will be updating all these charts.